Monday, May 8th, 2023. This is all about your Benjamins and the RLS Wealth Rundown with your weekly mixtape. Hope you had a great week and great weekend. I arrived late Friday morning, I guess late Friday night, early Saturday morning from a trip to Vegas last week for a conference with a bunch of my peers from around the country. And every time I come back from a conference, I am excited about the work that it is I do because I'm surrounded by great financial advisors. They're doing great work for their clients. So if you are not a client of RLS Wealth, you are in good hands if you find the right advisors out there. There are plenty of them that are doing great work, and I just spent a few days with all of them talking about marketing and content and how we can grow our businesses and doing it the right way. Leading with financial planning, leading with helping people find out who they are and what they want out of life, and doing more life planning as opposed to just spreadsheet planning. So really excited about getting back to work this week and diving into everything that we're usually working on. So with that, let's get to the headlines that may or may not be impacting your financial plan and portfolio. And we're going to start off with the Federal Reserve. To be no surprise there. So they met, they had their talk, they came out and they raised interest rates by 25 basis points. We were looking for hopefully a pause or 25 basis points, and they did 25 basis points. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. And the language coming out of the meeting was actually positive towards not raising at their next meeting in June. So we'll see how things go over the next few weeks, and we'll see if they pause, which is what the language suggested. They might be done for now, raising interest rates. So that could be a good thing. That could mean they feel like they have a good grasp on inflation, seeing it continuing to come down. But as we're going to see here in a moment, there are a few economic data points that work against the Fed not wanting to pause and want to go back to rising rates. So good news is 25 basis points as expected. Things aren't worse than they were expected. Things aren't better than they're supposed to be expected. So I guess this is a positive, and with the language that came out talking about not raising rates in the future. So we'll see how June goes. All right. Next up, one of the data points that does not make it easy for the Fed to pause is we had 253,000 jobs added in April. Unemployment ticked down to 3.4%. So you mentioned, if you remember, Chairman Powell talked about wanting to see unemployment numbers go up. He realized that by raising the interest rates, there would be a risk of people losing their jobs, and he was okay doing that because he felt that with higher unemployment for a shorter period of time, that was better than if we let inflation get out of hand. Well, it looks like they're bringing inflation back down, and employment picture still looks good. Wages also ticked up just a little bit. So that is part of the reason the consumer is able to withstand some of the inflation or make some adjustments within their spending to still live a good life, but maybe not do all of the things they were once doing. So again, jobs number a little bit lower than the average of the last 6 months. I think the average was like 269, but still within the addition of jobs that suggests we're in a strong economy, or a good economy at the very least. So job numbers looks good, which is not necessarily what the Fed wants to see to feel comfortable pausing with the rates, but I'm sure they had some insight to what the numbers were going to be coming out of their meeting. So jobs look good, wages ticked up, good for those of us out there. But also earlier in the week there's an article that said that the number of jobs available was declining. So we have job hires increasing, but the opportunities there decreasing, so we'll see what that means in the future as well. I mentioned last week I don't love to get into stock picking, or not stock picking, but stock talking, talking about one stock. You're not going to hear me make any picks on this show, but we talked about Apple last week because of how important of a stock it is to the indexes that a lot of us hold and just to the overall psychology of the market. They came out, had their second quarter of declining revenue. Last quarter was because of constraints with chips and things overseas. This was just a continuation of the declining revenue. This is only the third time in a decade that Apple has had back-to-back revenue declines in quarterly reports. But everything seemed to be okay. The market handled it well. The stock did well. The iPhone continues to remain very strong, which is the bellwether for Apple. So we got through this earnings report, at least Apple's earnings report, without sending the market into a major decline, because even though things were slowing down for them, it was within where maybe it should be given the state of the economy and this looming recession that we're all waiting for and looking for. Not looking forward to, but looking for. Homebuilders. Homebuilders remain very strong, which you would maybe not think because interest rates on mortgage obviously have gone up significantly over the last year. They ticked down a little bit, which was part of the reason in the short term homebuilders have been doing good, but this highlights the fact that there are not enough existing homes for home buyers. So even if your interest rates have gone up, there is a certain demographic of individuals that are getting to a point where it's time to buy their first house. There's not enough inventory in the resale market, so they go to the home builders. So it just shows how people will adjust within higher interest rates, and either they're making changes elsewhere or they're buying less house than they would have bought before, but the home builders still continue to do well, which again I think would go against what you might think if I were to ask you that. Go to a non-market topic real quick. The Writers Guild of America, so the people who write the TV shows that we watch, went on strike. Haven't been following this along very closely, but I think it's interesting, so something to follow. Luckily for me, I don't watch a lot of TV, so this should not impact me very much if it goes for very long. And a lot of times the stuff we throw on late at night before we get to bed are old shows that have already been written. So just something to pay attention to. I remember when I was younger, the writers went on a strike for a long period of time, and that was kind of the beginning of reality TV, or what made reality TV become greater, because you don't need as many writers to write. Even though we know a lot of these reality shows are scripted in some extent, it's not the same as writing a brand new show from scratch. So interested to see what goes on there, but again, if you're not watching very much TV, won't be a huge issue for you. And then we'll finally end with just a reminder, debt ceiling. There's an article I came across this week talking about how Janet Yellen said that we would be in trouble as far as paying our obligations by June 1st if the debt ceiling was not increased. So it is May 8th, which means we have a few weeks before June 1st, which means you're only going to hear more and more about this over the coming weeks. So just be prepared for that. There may be, again, market reactions to conversations and things that may happen and deadlines that may come and go and gridlock in DC. But if I had to bet, and I'm not a betting man, I did not do any gambling when I was out in Vegas. I almost did, but I didn't. I would imagine that debt ceiling gets increased or something happens to give us more time. If there is an election next year, which I believe there is, I think it would be political suicide to not raise the debt ceiling, come to some conclusion to allow us to continue to pay our debt. Going into a potential re-election campaign, which we've already heard President Biden is going to run again, to not pay and default on our debt would guarantee he would not win. So whether or not you think that's the right answer, it is kicking the can down the road, but this is what we do when it comes to this. I would expect to see the debt ceiling increase or some adjustments made and then a final adjustment made later in the year. So again, I just bring this up as not to create panic, but just to remind you, this will be a talking point. This will be on the headlines. A lot of what-if scenarios can come out of there. We'll have to wait and see, and what you may hear that may be super scary is one of infinite scenarios that may play out, but there are also a lot of other scenarios that could play out. If I'm going to bet, it would be that things work themselves out and we don't default on our debt and we just increase the debt ceiling. Whether that's a good thing or not for the long term, that is a different discussion, but we're not to that point yet. So that is all I had on my notes. So again, I had 7 articles this week, or 7 things to talk about, but we were able to get through them pretty quickly. So I hope that this all made sense, cleared up some of the things you may have heard, and also some of the things you're going to hear in the coming weeks, for instance, with the debt ceiling. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you guys have a great rest of the day, and we will see you all in the next episode.